I hope all is awesome. My name is Chris Maxwell, and today's topic is the NOM number. La Puerta! So, what is the NOM number? So, NOM stands for Norma Oficial Mexicana. So, it is the governing body that oversees the rules and regulations for whatever industry we're talking about, whether we're talking about car windows or tequila. Every industry has rules and regulations that are set and defined by these rules and regulations. The ones that we need to be specifically aware of are for tequila, it's NOM 006. For mezcal, it's 070. NOM 168 is specifically for bacanora. NOM 159 is for sotol. There was, for a short period of time, NOM 199, which was being used by raicilla and other destilados de agave, aka agave distillates, but now it's kind of overseen by 142, which is basically for health and sanitation to make sure that it's not going to kill you, but more importantly, that they're collecting taxes. And essentially, anything that sits in those categories is the wild, wild west. So they're not defined by or limited to the same parameters of, methanol content or alcohol content as there are for tequila, mezcal, sotol, and bacanora. You'll most commonly hear the use of NOM and NOM numbers in regards to tequila. On every single bottle, there is a NOM number, a 4-digit number that indicates, well, back in my day, that the number indicated that the distillery which produced the tequila. And while we can say that that's the case, it's gotten to be quite, not so black and white. The edges are very fuzzy, and a NOM number doesn't necessarily mean that that's who's producing it. Technically, it means it is the legal entity who is responsible for making sure that the product inside of that bottle of tequila meets all the requirements of being called a tequila. So, with that said, there is an app called Tequila MatchMaker. And when you open it up, it's going to give you a list of brands that they have verified, which are additive free. And a lot of these brands we carry here at La Puerta. They will also give you some newly added products to their database. So in this database, in here, there are 2,937 brands. Most of these brands are going to be active. And then there's going to be a bunch of others which are inactive, defunct, gone out of business, etc. So it'll give you a list of confirmed additive-free brands, newly listed products, and they also have it separated into brands, so you can search any brand in here. So let's just say you want to search for Fortaleza. So I'll put it in here, Fortaleza, and when it comes up, it's going to open up. It's going to tell me the NOM number, which is 1493. It's going to give me the different products. It's going to give me some brand information, such as the fact that it's confirmed to be additive free, the distillery, which produces it, which is Tequila Los Abuelos. Actually, the distillery is Distillería La Fortaleza. The company is Tequila Los Abuelos, ACDCV. The NOM number, once again, 1493. Contact information, and it'll also give you some updated news and notes and whatnot within the brand. So if I click on the NOM number right here, then it's going to take me to the page for this NOM. And as it's trying to load up, it's going to indicate what brands are produced at this distillery. So for those that know, Distillery La Fortaleza produces two brands, but it's the exact same juice, and there's a long story. We'll get into that at some other point in time. But anyway, there is Tequila Los Abuelos and Tequila Fortaleza. Tequila Los Abuelos is only sold in Mexico. It was originally sold in the United States, but like I said, we'll get into that at some other point in time if you don't already know the story. So on here are those two brands. But if we go in and search, let's just say, you know, uh, oh, did somebody say Casamigos? Alrighty, so Casamigos. So if I go to here, go to the page, boom. And if I go to brand information, it's going to tell me who produces it and where. It's also going to give me the previous producer as well, or the previous NOM number. And if I click on that, which is Productos Finos de Agave, there's going to be a whole list of brands that were at this distillery, that are at that distillery and that were at that distillery. So what does one brand separate itself from another? Well, that's a great question. And if a distillery has one set of tools to be able to make tequila, in other words, they have an autoclave, stainless steel, fermentation tanks and stills, one source of water. Every product is basically going to be the same. The difference is going to be within the quality of the agave and if there's any specialness of the agave, if it's coming from a different region or a very specific region, or if they are going to maybe do something different with the water. But essentially, the product is going to be very similar from one brand to the next. A lot of these distilleries can separate their products by using additives. And once again, we'll get into that down the road. So basically, if you see a NOM number that has a whole bunch of brands listed to it, there's a pretty good chance that the quality of those products are going to be very similar, but they're going to fluctuate from like $15 a bottle to $150 a bottle, but it's essentially the same juice. That's why it's important to be able to have this type of a product handy so you can look it up and be like, oh, what is that? I've never heard of that. You can get some information. You can get an idea of how it's produced, where it's produced. Because if we go in here, let's just say, like, if I open up for this, once again, this brand Campo Azul, which is at Productos Finos, and I click on any of the content, it's going to open up and it's going to tell me the production details, the agave type, bottling proof, the ABV, how it's fermented, what kind of stills are being used, how it's being crushed, how it's being cooked, how it's distilled, and the type of water. So that's going to be across the board through most of these distilleries that are listed in here. So you get a sense of idea of the production, but also in that aspect, there can be a variety of different production methods within that distillery. So Campo Azul is produced once again by Productos Finos, and they have brick ovens, they have autoclaves, and they have diffusers, so they can be able to mix and match different types of production methods to get different types of quality and product. The importance of the NOM number in tequila is that it gives you a reference, an idea of who produced it, but not always. And it's good to be able to kind of look that up and be like, oh, there's a bunch of brands that are associated with this, or there's only a couple of brands. Okay, cool. But a bunch of brands associated isn't necessarily a bad thing. So Cascawin, NOM 1123 has quite a few brands that are produced there, but they're all done with integrity and traditional production methods, and they're all delicious. Now, the really cool thing about Tequila MatchMaker is that not only is it going to tell you the way it was produced and who's responsible for the product, but you can go in and you can actually rate the product. You can put your own notes in. And so after a while, it starts to get an idea of what you like. It's going to, make recommendations for you of other brands. It's going to give you a list of your preferences based upon, if you prefer autoclave versus horno cooked agave. So it's really cool. It gets really deep. So it's a great tool for yourself to be able to grow and expand your palate, but also to be able to share with others. Okay, so now let's talk about the NOM numbers for mezcal. What you'll see on a bottle is a letter followed by 2 or 3 digits and then another letter. Those 2 letters indicate the state in which it was bottled. Now, unlike tequila, where the product has to be bottled within the denomination of origin, there was a loophole allowing the bottling of mezcal to be done so outside of the DO. And those are all labeled with a D and an F for District Federal. So there have been mezcals which have been produced in Oaxaca, but bottled in Mexico City or bottled in tequila. There have actually been brands of mezcal that have actually been bottled in tequila. How crazy is that, right? The NOM number doesn't necessarily tell you who the producer is because there are so few producers who actually own their own bottling facility. Oaxaca is one of those who produces their own mezcal and bottles their own mezcal. Also, within that context, there is a very beautiful small boutique brand. They're all boutique, right? There's a beautiful mezcal that's produced in the mountains north of Oaxaca City called Tosba, where they actually bottle everything at the distillery. So it's not very common, but it does happen every once in a while. Typically, what you'll find is that brands have their own bottling facility where they'll bring in multiple producers, whether it's somebody like Vago who has 4 different producers, and they'll bring that product into their bottling facility and they'll have that labeled under their own NOM. Del Maguey is another one. And for example, they've got producers all over the state of Oaxaca, but they also have a producer in Puebla as well. And all of those products are going to be bottled under the same NOM, which is O41X. O and X for Oaxaca. Now, in the context of Sotol, they do not have individual NOM numbers for each different distillery. And within Bacanora, the same is true with that. But at some point in time, they're going to have those different NOM numbers associated with them. So in the meantime, what we're looking for in the NOM, okay, be aware when people are like, oh, what NOM is that? If you don't know that NOM off the top of your head, use your Tequila MatchMaker and be like, it is NOM, blah, 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 blah. Or look at the bottle and go, blah, 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 blah. And then you can say that this tequila comes from this distillery and these other products are associated with this tequila. That's why it's important to know the NOM when you're serving it, when you're pouring it, when people are asking about it. You want to be aware. Definitely don't need to memorize all of these, but there's going to be a few that you'll start to memorize and remember and recognize as time goes on, and that's going to be completely awesome. Anyway, the NOM number doesn't necessarily guarantee that that's the producer, because I didn't get into that. Okay, so one of the rules and regulations that's stipulated within the norma of tequila or mezcal, for that matter, is that you can buy product from your neighbors or your competitors on the other side of town or on the other side of the street and blend it with your own product or bottle it exclusively as your own product when you didn't necessarily make it. And that's why, like when I said back in my day, we were able to tell who produced this tequila based upon the NOM number. Well, that was true back in the day, but now, as things have gotten to be more competitive, and people are selling more product, that they are buying tequila from other producers to be able to meet demand. Proud to say that Fortaleza is not one of those. And the way that you can tell is that Fortaleza is always out of stock. They are selling every drop that they produce. And if they were not out of stock and they were producing everything they were selling, that would mean that they were buying from other producers and either blending it in for their product, so they can meet the demand. But that is not the case. As you know very well, Fortaleza is consistently out of stock. Back in my day, we were always out of stock of the Añejo, and then we became out of stock pretty consistently of the Reposado. Now it's like all four expressions, Blanco, Still Strength, Reposado, and Añejo, are consistently out of stock. That's a key indicator that juice is not being bought by any other distillery to be able to fill these bottles to put on your shelves. So when you're pouring Fortaleza, you are pouring Fortaleza and nothing else. And I can tell you that's one of a few traditional producers who are doing that type of thing, which is completely awesome and one of the reasons why I love Fortaleza. Anywho, once again, if you have any questions about the NOM number or anything else, hit me up, let me know, let Merritt know, let Nick know. I hope all's good. And once again, we'll see you on the flip side. Cheers. La Puerta!